Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Wrestlenomics Radio. I'm Brandon Thurston, broadcasting live and on demand from Buffalo, New York, where today is Sunday, January 1st, 2023. Got the year right. And I'm joined today by Jesse Collings and maybe by Chris Gullo, who has just been sent away to reboot his computer. We'll see what happens. But hello, Jesse Collings. How are you? How's your new year?
New Year was pretty good. I hope all of our listeners had a good and safe New Year's Eve. And it starts, wrestling. There's already been one major show in Japan already by the time, probably more than one. I know the big Noah show with the Muto Shinsuke Nakamura match, which I believe has drawn the biggest. I haven't seen an attendance figure yet, but it was trending towards being the biggest non-New Japan show
Was
in
it
Japan.
Sumo Hall?
I think it was Budokan.
Okay.
I haven't seen an attendance figure yet for it, but I think it's basically they were talking. I heard talk about a possible sellout for that show. I haven't seen any confirmation. I haven't seen the show yet, but we've already got one major show down, and we've got a bunch of major shows, both in the U.S. and in Japan. I feel like coming up in the next week or two. Got AEW's debut in Seattle, which is probably going to be one of their biggest Dynamite tapings of the year from an attendance perspective. It might be the biggest Dynamite from an attendance perspective. I think they have over 8,000 tickets out.
Which would be more than Revolution. I believe they're under 6,000, I think, still
Yeah.
for Revolution.
Yeah, and of course, Revolution is almost three. Revolution is the first week in March, so there's still 2 months to go for Revolution. But yeah, I'm sure maybe like Grand Slam will do better than whatever they end up doing with the Seattle show. But that's a big show. Obviously, Wrestle Kingdom is this week. Bunch of other big shows in Japan. WWE has the Royal Rumble, obviously, coming up at the end of the month.
Yes, in San Antonio, with over 30,000 out. But yeah, we'll get into many, many different numbers today. Last week we had, it was Christmas last week Sunday. Today is New Year's Day, but last week Sunday was Christmas, and we didn't do a regular show, but I put out the Fall of Vince McMahon, so that is out there on YouTube and in the podcast archives if you missed that. We during Christmas, this was my Christmas. This is the view, if people are watching in video on YouTube. This is the view from my front porch on Christmas morning. That is a car in front of my house that is buried in snow. That is actually my car. It was very, very inconsistent. So Buffalo, if you don't know, if you haven't seen the news, had a huge blizzard. About 30 people have died in Buffalo from this blizzard. And this I live in the city, and the city was especially bad, and the cleanup was especially bad. But yeah, it was very inconsistent. Like
We're getting some insight into your neighborhood though here.
True. You can't see any addresses. You can't see any license plates. I did think about that. Here's Chris Gullo, who resides in the southern portion of Buffalo. I reside more so in the northern portion of Buffalo, but that's my car across the street, not that covered. The car near our house is like buried past the hood. But South Buffalo may have been hit even worse. Chris Gullo can update us on that situation now. Maybe.
Yeah, it was terrible. I had snow drifts as tall as my garage, which is about like 8 feet up the ground.
Wow.
Snow removal was absolutely terrible. I didn't see a plow until Wednesday. And the storm ended pretty much on Monday morning.
Shots fired between Mayor, not literal, but barbs were exchanged between Mayor Byron Brown and Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz, as blame was shifted around sort of about the cleanup. Despite all those votes that Mayor Brown got for mayor from the South Buffalo, he's not cleaning you up. Forget it.
As a neutral observer, it would seem like Buffalo, from an infrastructure standpoint, should be very well equipped to handle large snowstorms. It seems like
they're not, though.
Somewhat regular basis.
Yes. Well, we won't alienate any of our Buffalo politicos by going any further into this discussion, but But anyway, if you want to participate with Super Chat with a question or comment, if you're watching live on YouTube, you can do that. Feel free. First news, big news, I guess, in the world of TV ratings. John Cena, Big Match John, Big Draw John, was back on Friday SmackDown in a tag match where he teamed with Kevin Owens against Sami Zayn and Roman Reigns. We don't have final numbers yet. Those will be on a one-day delay because of the New Year holiday. So usually they would come out tomorrow, Monday afternoon. But instead, because of the New Year, they will come out Tuesday afternoon. The prelim rating is out. The prelim rating is, I don't have it right in front of me. Let me see if I can find it real quick. 2.441 million. About 2.4 million is the prelim. Now, the prelim is usually somewhere between 5 and 10% lower than the final. So that would indicate that this show is going to measure somewhere around 2.6 million viewers. If that's the case, this is going to be the highest rated SmackDown since the infamous exception of the 3.3 million viewers that SmackDown did on Christmas 2020 when it had an NFL game as its lead-in. Very unusual situation. If you exclude that exceptional circumstance, you have to go all the way back to February 2020 to find a rating that might be as high as this one, but we'll see for sure on Tuesday afternoon when the final rating comes out. Yes, I know that sometimes these prelim ratings, these fast affiliate ratings are misleadingly high, especially in NFL preseason time in August. People lose their minds because they think SmackDown has done this enormous number when really you're looking at the viewership mixed in with a lot of people watching NFL preseason games in various markets. That's not what happened here. No preemptions, no weather events. People were watching SmackDown, I believe, in 100% of the Fox affiliates. So nothing unusual that I know of here. No reason to think that this didn't do what it seems to have done. So Big Match John strikes again.
Did you guys watch the match? I haven't.
No. We don't watch wrestling on this show. We just talk about the numbers.
But I'm curious to know what people thought of the match. I haven't seen it. I've seen kind of mixed feedback on if people were excited, how excited people were for it or not. I mean, the amount of tickets that John Cena's presence sold is almost more impressive than the match, than the television rating.
He thousands of tickets were sold after he was announced for this event in Tampa. So, and they were also running on the same night in Toronto, which did a good house show number as well in the old Ricoh Coliseum, which I'll continue to call it.
What do you think about, like, and I guess we've seen this before, like, what do you think about how much of this do you think is Cena making a one-time appearance, a rare appearance, and popping a big number and drawing a lot of fans, versus if he were to be around more consistently, do you think they would sell this many tickets at other SmackDown tapings if he were to be announced? Do you think SmackDown would be close to this television rating? I guess like John Cena and Kevin Owens teaming against Sami Zayn and Roman Reigns, which most people would consider like kind of like the biggest star versus the hottest act in the company, is like a legit big match for WWE to advertise. But do you think like how much do you think of this is just Cena a one-time thing, kind of popping a big number, and how much do you think would be sustainable if Cena were to be around on a more consistent basis?
I think there's always this novelty factor whenever somebody who's almost anybody, any level of a star comes in, you'll see an initial pop or a return in this case. But I think John Cena is a particular significant attraction, and I think we've one of my narratives over the last couple of years has been, if you look back at the trends that I always point out and say, hey, look, between 2016 and 2019, we saw annual declines in various business areas, consumer related, of course, business areas for WWE. And why is that? Why was it the fans? Is it the social media reaction? Is it Roman Reigns? It's the lack of John Cena during that time, who stopped being a full-time performer for WWE at the end of 2015. And after that, I think there's other reasons that play as well, including the wearing off of the novelty of the WWE Network, and the quality of the content. Thank you, Vince McMahon. But I think it's the lack of John Cena as well from 2016 to 2019, where he was no longer a regular performer, whereas in previous years he was. And a lot of metrics, including ticket sales, including merchandise sales, including the cooling off of the W Network, all those things saw annual consecutive year declines. So if John Cena was around, if John Cena decided to quit doing voiceovers for car commercials and quit doing movies tomorrow and decided to go back to WWE, WWE would be better off as a business, not just for the first couple months, but I think for the long term.
Yeah, I just looked up on like, so when John Cena, before he was announced for this SmackDown show, to be wrestling on the SmackDown show, they had about 7,500 tickets out, which is pretty good. Anyway, and they're gonna end up with over 13,000. So that kind of shows the effect of how many tickets he can move as a drawing act. And I do wonder. I have kind of another question. I don't want to go off too big of a tangent because I know you guys got stuff ready, but
it's fine.
I'd be interested in seeing like. So, at the end of the year, a lot of people were talking about like what were the biggest moments in wrestling in 2022, where like some major takeaways you'll reflect on. And a take I saw was some people being kind of not upset, but kind of surprised that Stone Cold Steve Austin coming back and wrestling a match at WrestleMania for the first time in almost 20 years was like kind of forgotten about by the end of the year. And the reason I feel like it has been forgotten is because he didn't really have like a hot storyline going into the match. We didn't really know he was going to have a match. It wasn't like a real typical big WrestleMania build for something. It was kind of like a surprise that he wrestled. And so it doesn't come across as like that memorable because all you really remember is him like walking around and doing a walk and brawl with Kevin Owens. And I find it kind of interesting that like with Austin and even how they use Cena here, they didn't really have like a big storyline for these guys. Like Cena came back, he's Kevin Owens' tag team partner. His motivation was because he wanted to wrestle a match in every year, and so he just picked this match. Like you have the big star presence coming back, but they haven't seemed to be kind of like using the star and putting him in like what I would consider like a hot storyline or a big angle. And I'd be curious to know like why that is, like why they couldn't at least they could have done something with Cena. Obviously, it was a huge business success, as we just mentioned, but it doesn't seem like they could have done like a bigger angle to get people even more excited for the Cena match, as opposed to just John Cena's going to wrestle Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn because he wants to have a match in 2022 to keep up some streak that nobody even knew he had. And I find the utilization of those guys who are huge drawing cards, kind of like they could be doing more with them, but I don't know if that's a scheduling thing, if that is they don't want to put too much of a focus on the big star, but it seems weird to me that they don't kind of what I feel like maximize the potential of those guys to really create something memorable as opposed to just doing a one-time, pop rating.
Yeah, we should mention too that the SmackDown was heavily promoted during NFL games on Fox too. I had MJ from MJ constantly reminding me that this was, and I did see it myself. I did see the promos during the NFL games on Fox, hyping as they usually do, even when it's not John Cena, but this week particularly, SmackDown commercials during those NFL games.
Just back to Jesse's original question on John Cena. Is it because the summer of Cena happened to coincide with live touring returning? It's kind of hard to look at that data to see how much of an impact he had in that period. On like
I think that there's definitely some noise there. You're right about like the return and kind of the enthusiasm for the return. But I mean, even when the summer of Cena, like Cena was announced for shows that already had tickets on sale, and he was like, they would be doing 4,000 fans. They might have 4,000 tickets out, and then two weeks before the show, then Cena gets announced, and they'd end up with 8,000 fans. So Cena obviously was a big draw, but I'm also curious to know how much, like Cena's drawing power, does it wane over time as we get further and further away from his peak as a star, particularly because Cena was always so popular with children. children's interest in wrestling can be perhaps more fleeting than adults, in the sense that they watched it when they were. If you were a kid and you watched John Cena when you were 10, and now you're 16 or 17 years old, you might not have still be watching wrestling, because a lot of kids grow out of it. And Cena having not been around for the last few years to really become like the children's champion and create new fans, does that cause his drawing power to wane? Does he have the same kind of special presence in the hearts and minds of fans now that he hasn't been a consistent member of the roster for a number of years? Business seems to suggest that's not an
I
issue.
think in this time, we see, if anything, the opposite in terms of when, and some of this is muddied by the fact that people are, by these kinds of people are always irregular. But think about like the Undertaker and other examples of people who, once the longer you're around, I feel like the greater your star power, your drawing ability becomes, because you become consumed in retrospect more so over time, which is like it's the opposite effect of, look at the quarter hours for any show, and you'll notice that the newer stars who haven't been on television as long, I don't know if I want to say quarter hours, but look at various other trends, and you'll see that people who are fresher, newer stars don't always tend to do as well as people who are more established stars. And I think that's a particular phenomenon of like the last 20 years or 30 years, where this entertainment is consumed more so through media than through live events. And there's a lot of, especially now, of rewatching old library content and creating these nostalgic connections with people who are over the age of 40, for example.
Well,
like
you're tapping into a larger fan base, as opposed to a new young a current star is only really appealing to the current fan base. A star from the past is appealing perhaps to the current fan base, but also to a larger group of people who have stopped watching. Um, the Undertaker, to me, is kind of a unique example, I think, because he was around for so long, and everyone that got into wrestling at some point in time that watched WWE since 1990 until today probably has a fondness memory of the Undertaker being their favorite wrestler when they were a kid. I think with people like Edge, who came back and have not proven to be really noticeable um, difference makers in business, it kind of shows that, like, I do think that kind of nostalgia is only reserved for like the biggest of big stars in a lot of ways, like people like John Cena or maybe the Undertaker or maybe Goldberg, as opposed to maybe guys who are at like a level below, like someone like an Edge or maybe Randy Orton in the future, or these guys who were seen as main eventers and were seen as, like, multiple time world champions, but were not the big business difference makers that some of these other guys were.
Sure. So we'll go to now. Again, if you want to throw a super chat in, you can. Wrestle Kingdom is coming up. Today's January 1st. Wrestle Kingdom is January 4th, Wednesday. So that to us will be like early morning Wednesday. Either of you are going to be up in the wee hours of the East Coast time to catch Wrestle Kingdom live? I've done it just about every year in the last several years or so.
I'm debating it.
I can't. I've done it before. Wednesday is the like inauguration day at the Massachusetts State House for all of our new officials who were elected into office in November. So I have to go to the State House on Wednesday morning, which is really throwing
Real journalism.
Yeah, what I really want to do is stay up all night and watch Wrestle Kingdom, or as a contingency plan, work from home and watch put Wrestle Kingdom on in the background, which is probably what the most likely thing that I do is. But it's going to be very difficult to watch Wrestle Kingdom at the Massachusetts State House, so I'm probably not going to be able to watch it until later that evening.
So Wrestle Kingdom, this will be. Let me get this straight. This will be a Tokyo Dome, of course. One night, thank God. One night, not two. Full capacity for the first time since January 2020, since just before COVID. I know Japan has been very slow about allowing people to cheer again. Cheering is allowed at this event for the entire crowd. However, there are some vague restrictions on the kind of cheering you can do, which I don't know is particularly pertinent to wrestling. But apparently, it was like singing or extended chanting. That there are limits on that, or there's a special section over there that you can do that in that has limited capacity or something, right?
I'd be curious to know how that's enforced. Like, is there going to be like stewards with like stopwatches? Like, all right, they're started a chant now, and if it goes over 10 seconds, we need to. They're going to get kicked out or something like that. Like, but yeah, I mean, it should hopefully be. They're gonna. I believe they're. I haven't seen a number in a while, but I feel like the number I heard was 20,000.
Tickets out.
Yeah, like and that was like probably a couple weeks ago. But I believe that they're going to be doing. They're not going to be doing as good as some of these high numbers that we see in this chart, like doing 38 or 40,000 people. But they are going to be doing better than they did last year. Obviously, only being one night kind of changes the math. There's
these numbers are from New Japan's official website, and do either of you know when does what we believe about New Japan's announced attendances is that at a certain point they started to become more real, whatever that means. I think it's a reflection of real tickets distributed, not paid attendance, not ticket sales. Does anybody know the moment in time where we believe these numbers became more accurate as in terms of reflective of at least tickets distributed as opposed to some fictional inflated number?
I'm gonna assume
When Inoki left.
No.
I'm gonna assume when Bushiroad brought the company,
which was 2012, 2011.
Yeah.
No, even after that. So May, I believe the very end of May 2015 is the last of what we think are very unreliable attendances, and after that point, middle of 2015 or so, it becomes real. So that's
Brandon,
what I got on the screen.
Brandon, do you mean to tell me that there weren't 75,000 people at the Tokyo Dome for the Inoki final?
I don't want to disrespect Antonio Inoki here. I'm sure, and we don't even believe that the Tokyo Dome can fit 70,000.
No, if we believe that this 40,000 figure is relatively close to what a sellout would be in the Tokyo Dome,
that's day one for 2020. Yes,
it's highly suspect that 75 or 70,000 people were at the Inoki final. But that was one of the funny trends of, if you were to follow. Have you read the book Eggshells by Chris Charlton?
I haven't, but I should.
So there's an excellent book by Chris Charlton, who does English commentary for New Japan, but it's called Eggshells, and it is a history of every single show to ever take place at the Tokyo Dome across all promotions. And a funny trend as you read it, as they go out throughout the 90s, is how everyone claims a sellout, but the figures vary very wildly on what it is.
It's different configurations, different
stages.
Right,
but it goes from, like the Inoki final, which is 70,000 fans, is a sellout, and then another show might have a sellout at 30,000 fans. And it's like, there cannot be a 40,000 fan difference.
In my days as a teenager covering Japanese wrestling, and I'm sure that this terminology is still being used today in terms like the no vacancy, the super no vacancy. So everything is a sellout, a super sellout, or a super no vacancy sellout. They're...
Yeah, well, we see that in the United States, right? Like there might be a sellout of WWE might say, oh, they sold out, or they came close to a sellout when they sold like 8,000 tickets to a Raw show. But if they were in a arena that they could have sold like 14,000 tickets in, then is that really a sellout? Is the elaborate staging that WWE puts up and AEW too puts up, that walls off seating, like, does that count as a sellout?
You put tickets on sale on the last day because you finalize your configuration, so there were still like
right. If Forbidden Door had like the obstructive view seats that were like behind the stage that they put out like a few like a week before the show, and those didn't go. They didn't sell all of those tickets. So did Forbidden Door really sell out? If they if there were still tickets you could have bought,
I think that the point is like the sellout, as I've learned here, in largely thanks to WrestleTix, is that there's not. Sellout and not sellout is not this easy binary question. It's I think that the appropriate way to look at it is like, well, if you sold 98-99% of the inventory that was on sale for most of the time while these tickets were on sale, then it's probably a sellout. Or maybe that's not quite the right way to put it, but if you sold 99% of the tickets that could have been on sale given the initial configuration, not counting like the 50 tickets that may have been put on sale on the final day or something like that. I think that's close enough to what people have in mind when they use the word sellout. Anyway, a brief
something.
Yes.
Sorry, there's something interesting about this show, in that the main event of the show, the match that will almost definitely be going on last, is Jay White versus Kazuchika Okada. But there's also the Will Ospreay versus Kenny Omega match, which to Western audiences is probably a bigger deal than the Okada and Jay White match. Dave Meltzer told a funny anecdote where he was on New Japan World the other day. And New Japan World, if you just go to it, it defaults to being in Japanese. And there's a tab at the top. You can switch it to English. So they have a Japanese and English site. And when he loaded it up, there's a big Wrestle Kingdom banner at the top. And it's in Japanese by default. And the match on the Wrestle Kingdom banner at the top is Jay White versus Kazuchika Okada. And then he went up to the tab and he switched the site to English. And it's the exact same layout, and the banner's still there, but the banner says Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega. So there's one match kind of being advertised to Western audiences as being the main event, and there's another match being advertised to the Japanese audiences as the biggest match on the show.
This reminds me of Pride in the days where that was a Japanese MMA event that was also being sold on pay-per-view in the United States. So you'd have like Don Fry and Ken Shamrock at Pride 19. God, I remember the number, where that was, an upper card match, but it was not the main event. I don't know what the Pride 19 might have been. Was Pride 19? No, that was Pride 20 with Vanderlei and Krokop. Anyway, there were other matches that were bigger to the Japanese audience, but yeah, you'd have the U.S. audience that had a different interest. Anyway, the brief history of the attendance for these events over the recent years, where we have from 2016, the first year that we have a credible attendance, let's say, 25,000. In 2016, 26,000, so it gets a little bit higher. And then 2018, it bumps way up to 35,000. 2019, 38,000. And then 2020, they go to 2 days, and they draw 40,000 on day one, 30,000 on day two. That's a total of 70,000. Take that, Antonio Inoki. And then the previous 2 years, they've done 2-day events at a limited capacity with about 12,000 on the first day, 7,000 on the second day. So you're hearing 20,000 out for this event at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an accurate figure, I'm sure, in some ways, but that is the number that I think was reported.
So maybe we end up with like 30, and walk up is, if the legend has it, that especially on events like this, and depending on the day of the week, depending on the weather, you might get a strong walk up, you might not.
Yeah, it's we'll see what happens with that. I mean, a big thing obviously during the pandemic years, but obviously like in the growth from 2016, 2017 to 2018, 2019 was a pretty sizable amount of foreigners coming in and going to have you been before?
I've never been to Japan.
No.
But Paul's been all over the world. I don't know if he's been to Japan though.
No, it's on the bucket list though, for sure.
No, I mean I haven't been either, but plenty of people, traveling to Wrestle Kingdom, traveling to Japan over New Year's to go to these shows. Like I forget, but I think the figure like Dave Meltzer was saying, like at like probably the biggest show, probably that 2020 show, there was like 10,000 foreigners there, or a huge number of foreign fans traveling to Japan for that event. And that obviously due to the pandemic has been totally out the window for most people. I believe there are some foreign fans that will be at the show this year. But even now, it's still very difficult to get.
Sasha Banks will be one of them. Yes, perhaps.
Yes, Sasha Banks at ringside. But
there was almost 10,000 at the Budokan last night for Muto and Nakamura.
Okay, so not a sellout, but still that's a really big crowd.
Yeah,
for modern times.
Yeah, for any promotion, and certainly for Noah, and certainly for a non-New Japan promotion.
And Budokan is another one of those arenas where, like, we thought the capacity was supposedly 16,500 for all these years, and it's maybe more like 14,000 or something like that. So anyway, that's Wrestle Kingdom. I would be surprised if the number that they announce is in the realm of even the 2018 number. I would expect it to be closer to the 2016 or 2017 numbers, which is one measurement, their biggest event of the year, that it may be reflective of, look at the state of popularity or the strength of the business in New Japan at this point. It's certainly, there was a peak here in 2019 and 2020 that is in the past, and it may not just be COVID that has hurt their business, but maybe there has been some genuine, that may be related to COVID, but some genuine decrease in popularity and decrease in business for New Japan. But we'll see what number they announce for Wrestle Kingdom. Anything more to say about this card here? I don't think I have more to say. There's 12 matches. Moving on to Variety. Yes, did you have something more?
No, we're good. We can move on.
Okay. Variety had put out their annual article where they tell you for each network, or at least for the top 150 networks or so, this is how much viewership was lost for this network year to year. I do have to take issue with something that was at the very first sentence of this article from Variety. It begins, "There may come a time when it just doesn't make sense to rank the broadcast and cable networks anymore. Actually, that time is probably already here, with most viewing now taking place via streaming and other means. And yet Nielsen numbers, which include time shifting and other ways people watch, not just live, are the best barometer of who's watching what in the linear world." So the time is probably already, with most viewing takes place on streaming and other means. Is that an accurate statement? Streaming as a percentage of all watch time. Any guesses on what that is in, say, the month of November? Anyone have any guesses?
What do you want me to guess?
What
percentage of all watch time is streaming?
Of all TV time, what percentage is streaming?
Did it
spent in front of television?
Did it recently not become the majority? I'll guess 40%, but
45%, I'll say.
It is about 38%. So Nielsen puts out their article called The Gauge every month, and they tell you here of all the time that people in the United States spend watching a television, how much of that time, what percentage of that time is streaming, traditional broadcast, traditional cable, and other stuff. And it's now, don't get me wrong, it's been trending more and more streaming, less and less traditional TV. But I think people have this misperception, and apparently this article in Variety does have this misperception that the majority of TV watch time is streaming and is not traditional TV. That's not the case. The majority of TV watch time is still traditional TV. It's getting smaller. It's getting closer to being less than half, but it's still more than half. In November, it was, 26 plus 32? That's more than half. That's more than 50%. People are, and I'm sure this is strongly skewed by older people who are skewing in watching traditional TV. That said, it's still the case that the majority of time that people spend watching a television is spent watching the old media, traditional broadcast and cable. But anyway, we do have this. This will inform our view about all TV is down. Okay, how true is that? And we break this down. Variety breaks this down for us with Nielsen data by the network. So Nielsen shows that ESPN is up. ESPN was up for the year. Paramount was up for the year. Basically, every other network that I chose to look at here is down. And so I chose to look at a lot of the top ones and then picked out some that are involved in wrestling. And we have, other than ESPN and Paramount, those are the only two on the screen that I've got that are actually positive year over year. But so let's pick out some wrestling related networks. USA Network, home of Raw, down 13%. TNT, home of Rampage, down 12%. TBS, home of Dynamite, down 15%. And Fox, do we have Fox on here?
Yeah.
Fox 14% it's down, which is not as bad as most of the comparisons for wrestling. We're looking at total viewership here. So Dynamite, which is on TBS, is actually up 2% on the year. SmackDown is up 2% on the year, which is obviously better than their home networks. Raw is only down 1% as opposed to USA Network, which is down 13%. Impact on Access TV down 13%. Access TV is down 13%. So right on par with their own network. We have they have something called Viceland on here, which I assume is the Vice network, down 14%.
Yeah.
And Rampage down 22%, which is actually worse than TNT, which is down 12%. Obviously, Rampage has its own issues there. But what I know what you're thinking, though. What about the demo? The demo, only ESPN is up in the demo. I mean, there might be some other networks that are up, but as far as the ones that I've selected here, which is about 20 of them or so, that I think would be of our interest, ESPN is up 13% in the demo. Everybody else is negative. And the moral of the story here is that most of these deltas for wrestling shows, yes, they're down in the demo, but they're not down as badly as their home network. Dynamite is down 3% in the Precious demo, but TBS is down 20%. SmackDown is down 7%, but Fox is down 23%. Just keep that in mind when we talk about how SmackDown and probably all wrestling shows are a loss leader and they don't make their money back on ad sales, but do they justify some portion of their subscription carriage fees? Raw.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to say, like, I think, well, you can finish with the Raw thing because my point was related to that.
Raw is down 7%. USA Network is down 25%. NXT is down 17%. USA Network is down 25%. Impact is down 26%. Access didn't make this top 50 list. Rampage is down 37%, and TNT is down 18%. And now, yeah.
It's something that we talk about a lot on here.
Are we going to have this debate that I've been gearing up for weeks on end? Yes.
Oh, I don't think it's going to be that. I don't know what you're talking about, but I can't imagine you've been gearing up for what I'm going to say.
Okay.
But we talk about how it's been reported a bunch and discussed a bunch. How important WWE is specifically to NBCU and specifically to the USA Network, and just how important wrestling is to that station. And you see the 18 to 49 decline here is minus 25% overall for USA Network. And that's with Raw and NXT taking up 2 out of the 5 primetime slots during the week. And unlike Fox and unlike TBS and unlike TNT, USA really doesn't have any major sports kind of thing that could be buoying the network beyond having wrestling on it, right? TBS has...
What we are looking at here, too, by the way, is prime time. Below are the prime time rankers for broadcast, cable, and premium.
TBS has the baseball playoffs, and they have, the March Madness tournament a couple weeks a year, and they have some, sport, MLB. They have legitimate top-tier sports programming in their lineup. TNT obviously has the NBA, and now the NHL. So they have, and Fox obviously has, the NFL and all sorts of other, major sports in their broadcast network. So all those entities have kind of other things besides wrestling. USA Network really only has wrestling. And you look at the even with Raw only being down, a small percentage, relatively speaking, year over year in 18 to 49, USA's is down 25% over the year. So what does that say about all the other programming on USA? They're really sinking the ship.
Which is what are we talking about there? Probably reruns of Law and Order and things like that are airing on prime time.
I guess I was going to say it is an Olympic year.
Yeah, there was Olympic coverage. Yeah,
but USA Network also had the Olympics in 2021. They had the Summer Olympics,
and it was on USA Network though. It might have been on NBC Sports.
Oh, that might have still used that. That's a good point. They might have been on NBC Sports at the time. But it kind of just goes to show the broader view of how important wrestling is to USA Network, how important it is to that part of NBCU's profile, and why they have been so aggressive in bidding high for maintaining those Raw rights. And they're probably going to continue to do so because their profile really needs wrestling to kind of keep that network afloat. And if they didn't have Raw, and even NXT seems to be doing better than the average USA Network show, their network would really cease to be relevant on cable packages, seems like.
Yeah, and what we have there is the delta for, it's just a percentage difference. I want to look at how does NXT compare as an 18 to 49? US 224,000 viewers in the demo, which NXT is doing what? do I have the number here? I don't. NXT is doing what, about a 0.14 on average for the year or something like that. So if I take a 0.14 and I can multiply that by the universe, which is 1304 or something like that, I get about 182. And this is telling me that the average is 224. So moral of that story is NXT is below the average, which I don't know. It's not inconceivable. Well, I guess that average includes Raw, which is probably pulling that up anyway. Anything more to add there?
The collapse of cable news is notable. Certainly on the CNN and MSNBC.
Yes. MSNBC is down 40%, CNN down 35%.
And we kind of talk about, like, on cable, it's sports and it's news. Obviously, on this scale, Fox News is still doing quite well comparatively, but these other major cable news networks are down huge compared to last year.
And
how about that? Oh, go ahead.
Who gets the credit for Paramount Network being only down 7%, and when it comes to actually being up in total viewership by 8%?
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, honestly, like I would read a whole book about Yellowstone, because I find having, obviously everyone that listens to the show, and obviously us three here, like, just knowing what we know about cable ratings trends, the fact that a scripted show has been just so gigantically massive and is doing total viewership numbers on cable that are only rivaled by Monday Night Football.
I think my
is
suspicion
incredibly fascinating.
Is that Yellowstone? Have either of you ever watched an episode of Yellowstone?
I have not.
Yes, I have.
Okay, I've watched like a couple episodes.
Same thing here. Yeah.
And it seems to me to be this is my suspicion, is that there are other scripted shows that are popular, obviously, but they are clearly not as popular. Maybe in general than this show, but they're certainly not as popular on traditional TV. I think this is a show that appeals to the traditional TV viewer consumer more so than any other scripted show does.
Well, clearly from a data perspective, but from and
maybe older audiences.
From like a theming or like a writing perspective, I feel like, every show that I see pitched on, whether it's network or cable television, is trying to capture that audience, maybe that older skewing audience that still watches, network television or traditional cable. But this is the one that has captured all of those imaginations far better than any other show that's been put either on network or on cable television, which makes it so fascinating. It's not like it's the only show out there that kind of is thematically catered towards like older white viewers. Those shows are everywhere and they're being pitched all of the time. This is the one that was able to succeed and do it. Why exactly is it Kevin Costner's star power? Is it because the show's, very good? Is it very interesting? Is it just the perfect show that encapsulates that? It must be, because it's not like it's on NBC. It's not like or even like a, or FX or TBS, or it's on Paramount Network, which is not a very big network. It's the old Spike TV that was rebranded a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Rebranded. Yeah. Did Spike? Am I misremembering this? Did Spike TV become Esquire Network for a short period of time and then became Paramount Network? Or I'm thinking of G4 becoming Esquire Network.
Esquire I think was separate.
Yeah, so I'm totally misremembering that. It was Paramount. It was Spike, and then it was Paramount.
Okay. But yes, y'all respect your governor, John Dutton. Again, super chats we will take at the end if you have a question or a comment to put in. I guess when we're talking about wrestling ratings, especially if we're looking at these year-over-year differences, I think it's worth mentioning that there's definitely been trends that we can point out that are meaningful that over the course of the year. NXT has finished strong. While AEW Dynamite is up year over year, they've flattened out towards the end of the year. Rampage continues to fall, but falls at a less negative rate. And I don't know, SmackDown is finishing strong too, especially once we add in that last number, it'll probably be bumped a little bit more too. So that's the stuff before we now finally get into what I guess is like if we're thinking about the year-end awards, whatever awards system you prefer, I think the rest of the show will be quite meaningful towards that, or at least interesting. Most watched wrestling show episode is our first subject. What was the episode of the given wrestling show that was the most watched through the entire year? What single episode had the most viewers? And the answer to that question, which I revealed in our pre-show meeting, is 9/23/2022, Friday Night Smackdown. Smackdown is the most watched show on average, and naturally it has the most watched single episode. 2,535,000 viewers, 2.535 million viewers. The Cena episode might beat that. Good chance it will. And it also had the highest quarter hours, which are 9:23 at 9:23, or at least that was the second highest quarter hours, encapsulating that minute, where they did have nearly 2.8 million viewers from 9 to 9:15, and then 2.6 million viewers from 9:15 to 9:30. And I don't think that what the content that was actually on the screen has that much to do with the quarter being up in that case, so much as I think people were expecting Bray Wyatt to either return or for additional information, clues to be revealed.
How about that? How about if you were to give me 20 guesses on who was the highest rated quarter hour in wrestling this year? I would never guess Otis.
Otis. Yes. Braun Strowman versus Otis, the Brawling Brutes promo and an ad break.
I think we're giving Bray Wyatt too much credit here. I think obviously people wanted to see Butch cut a promo.
No respect for Bray Wyatt.
I think Butch cutting a promo is really what the biggest rating was. I think that's what people were tuning in to see.
Perhaps. What else do we have here? The biggest. So I will have a conclusion to make here in a moment. The biggest growth quarter hours. Okay, so those were the 2 quarter hours that had the most viewers over the entire year for wrestling. But another way, maybe sensibly, to look at this is let's look at what were the quarter hours that grew the audience the most compared to the quarter hour that came before it. And I have here the top 6, which gives us an example from each show, at least one example for each show. And we have for SmackDown on October 28th, growing the audience by 37%, 28% in the demo, is the 8:15 to 8:30 quarter hour. Last 2 minutes of the Bloodline versus the Brawling Brutes, post-match angle with Roman Reigns, an ad break, Bloodline Live promo. Was that content responsible for growing the audience 37%? Maybe.
I think we're seeing a trend here that Butch was featured in both of these things.
I can't deny that. Rampage, the biggest growth quarter, May 20th. This was, in fact, a preempted edition at 6:15 to 6:30. Bryan Danielson, John Moxley versus Matt Sydal and Dante Martin grew the audience 22%. Is that meaningful? Maybe. I mean, it's John Moxley and Bryan Danielson. It doesn't sound ridiculous. NXT, we got an overrun with LA Knight and Dolph Ziggler growing the audience 21%. Maybe that's meaningful. And then as far as something that's not an overrun, March 22nd, that last one was March 15th. This is March 22nd. Bobby Roode and Braun Breaker grew the audience 20%. Maybe that's meaningful. Raw, Judgment Day, AJ Styles, the OC live angle. I believe this is where the OC returns to WWE on October 10th. Grew the audience 20%. And Dynamite, June 15th, the post-match angle with the United Empire, Orange Cassidy, Roppongi Vice, an ad break, John Moxley and Hiroshi Tanahashi live promo, Jericho Appreciation Society and Suzuki-gun, I think we're also involved in that. Anyway, not sure about my label there. Grew the audience 18%. These are the biggest growth quarters.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to look at it, like, all of these seem to check out. Like, they seem to be more believable, I guess, in the sense that...
Judgment Day, a draw. AJ Styles and the OC, a draw.
Yeah, I mean, you would say, like, okay, like, pretty much all of these, I would say, would have what most people would view as the biggest star or one of the biggest stars on each brand. It's not Otis in the quarter hour, but you were to say, like, okay, like on SmackDown, it's the Bloodline, it's Roman Reigns, it's that angle, It's on Raw or on Dynamite or Rampage, it's John Moxley, it's Bryan Danielson, um, Chris
Just because we're talking about
Jericho,
it, still go. That's all.
uh, and then NXT, it's Braun Breaker versus Bobby Roode, and the Raw one is interesting because I guess it's growth, so it's not like it's not total viewership.
You said in this very program, Jesse, Edge is not a draw. Was Edge even involved in the Judgment Day by then? I guess he's probably been turned on by then.
Had he been, was he on television? I think he probably was involved.
This is probably the I don't know. This is probably the Finn Balor Judgment Day by this time. October?
Oh yeah, I think that's when Edge was on.
But he was feud. When did they write Edge off with that angle at they had the I Quit match?
Somebody Google it.
Yeah. I will Google it.
Okay.
Because that was the last time we saw him on television, right?
To this day.
That was in. Was that Extreme Rules?
Which is in September.
Yep.
This is October.
Yep. So it would have been September.
So no Edge here. No Edge here.
Well, he was on Raw in October. Now I'm looking, seeing that Raw. He was on Raw on October 4th. So was he on Raw after that angle?
Anyway,
I'm gonna get to the bottom of this.
Okay. But by the way, if you want to submit a question or a comment with the super chat, we'll take it at the end. So I want to kind of contrast this to. Yes.
Extreme Rules was on October 8th.
Oh, okay.
So this would have been in the immediate aftermath of his Extreme Rules. So I think what happened was they wrote Edge off of television, and then immediately people were like, all right, I can tune back into Raw. And boom, that's why this 10-10 show did so well.
I see. It fits perfectly.
Yes.
So anyway, we'll look at YouTube. And the most, so let's do AEW first. This is the most watched YouTube videos on AEW's channel in the year. And we have some lines here showing you the how these grew over time. And I'm only following them for the first 7 days because that's the nature of the scripts that I run. But because that's when most of the viewing, I should say, happens. But anyway, we have here the top 10 AEW videos on the YouTube channel. And it's CM Punk is back in August. This is him returning from his injury and probably calling out Heyman Page. Then number 2 is CM Punk earning his doing something with MJF. Jeff Hardy's return. John Moxley wins the title over CM Punk in that short match. Wheeler Yuta bleeding all over John Moxley. Keith Lee comes to AEW. Bryan Danielson doing something with John Moxley, probably about to become a team or something. Bryan Danielson doing something with John Moxley in February. I'm summarizing these for the weird titles that AEW gives their YouTube videos. Jeff Hardy takes flight in an 8-man tornado tag match. And what happened when the Hardys showed up on Rampage? So what I'm seeing here is a lot of CM Punk, a lot of John Moxley, some Bryan Danielson, a lot of Hardys. And that tells me a clearer story, I would say. I know we could look deeper into the court hours. I guess we'll look at WWE before I say something. All right, here's the top 10 for WWE. Okay, and I had to, because it's WWE and they have a lot of different content, especially archival content that they put on their channel periodically, every week. I did some things to concentrate on things that happened in this year as opposed to matches that they're posting from years ago. And I excluded things that had the word highlights in them, that were highlights of an entire show. I excluded kickoff events. I excluded things that said playlist in them that debatably should have been included because they were, for example, playlists of the feud between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. Anyway, the top 10 here is Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns in June. Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns in January. The Undertaker at WrestleMania getting a pop. Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns in February. Braun Strowman returning in September. MVP and Omos attacking Bobby Lashley in April, probably right after WrestleMania. Brock Lesnar, Paul Heyman, and Roman Reigns in March. Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre in August. Goldberg and Roman Reigns in February. RK Bro and the Usos unifying the titles in May. And I think we see a pretty consistent story here in this top 10 of Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns with 3 different parties here, right? Drew McIntyre, Brock Lesnar, and Goldberg.
Was Roman Reigns involved in the RK Bro versus Usos tag team match too? I
Possibly.
can't remember like the what happened in the match, but it's possible, right? That
Yeah.
he could have been in the thumbnail.
Yeah, or he could have been on the outside. I don't know. It was on SmackDown. Anyway, and I feel that, and this has been kind of the way I've been feeling for months, is that the if you want to know something about talent analytics, you want to know which wrestlers, which talent are associated with fan interest, with viewer interest. I think YouTube data tells you a lot clearer of a story than quarter hours do, because quarter hours are marred with a lot more external problems that put a lot more noise into the analysis, including ad breaks, including what came before the show, including what else was on TV at that moment. Whereas YouTube, while YouTube is not associated with a fraction of the revenue that television is, nonetheless, YouTube will test for you which segments of the show are drawing interest in a way that is much more clean than quarter hours do, because it doesn't have those problems of ad breaks in the middle, the influence of what came before the show, what competition happened to be on other channels at the same time. And we get much more consistent stories, I think. We could look deeper into the core hours than we just did a moment ago, but I think we get much more consistent stories from this data.
So, do you think that WWE should sign and bring back Kavita Devi, the Indian power lifter who did the huge YouTube numbers?
No, because that's one example. But if we
No,
have
I know.
if you have a preponderance of examples over time,
Yeah, you know what was interesting if you can go back to the AEW ones for a second, just kind of one of the things I looked at. If you look at 2 out of the 4 biggest YouTube videos, and certainly including the one that was the biggest by a wide margin, were related to were related to the CM Punk John Moxley kind of build towards their match at All Out, which was kind of a controversial build, and in hindsight has kind of been blamed for being not ultimately not that effective when it came to selling the pay-per-view.
hurt the pay-per-view perhaps, yeah.
Right. But what's notable is that, at least from YouTube data, it seems like people were really interested in seeing what was going to happen. Now, maybe they watched, John Moxley squash CM Punk, and they weren't necessarily happy about it, and so they tuned in to see that, but weren't tuned in to see the follow-up. But I did think it's kind of notable that, like, as far as like what YouTube would suggest that was, AEW's hottest program of the entire year.
I mean,
just looking at
I would apply a
views.
narrative of like, people saw the match, so the novelty of seeing the match at the pay-per-view was lessened by
Right,
the
in
fact
that
that they did it on
circumstance.
television.
Right, and it was a squash match that shocked everyone. But I thought that was relatively notable. Obviously, Jeff Hardy is doing quite well as a YouTube draw.
Some of this is that they came to AEW or Jeff did come to AEW in that year, but he still got a couple things that made the top 10 after that.
Right, like Keith Lee is,
Yes.
in the top 5. He's probably not one of the top 5 biggest stars in AEW, but people, I mean, and you could say the same thing about WWE. Like Braun Strowman's return was a highly viewed video,
Yes.
but would Braun Strowman now be considered like a top draw in WWE? Probably not.
If we went further than the top 10 for AEW, I bet we would see the debut of Samoa Joe in here, and not to say Samoa Joe isn't a valuable star for AEW, but he's
but
in
it's
the top 10.
Right. We're looking at it kind of like in WWE. We're looking at Roman Reigns. We're looking at Brock Lesnar. We're looking at Goldberg. Not Steve Austin.
True. Yeah. In the top 10 anyway.
Yeah, The Undertaker, obviously, giving his TED Talk, was up there.
That was at the Hall of Fame. So I was thinking this was the WrestleMania pop.
The MVP helps almost launch a sneak attack on Bobby Lashley. Does that have like a hilarious thumbnail or something? Because that one doesn't it really seem to stand out as far as something that
I will add this caveat. When we analyze YouTube data, I think there is Brock Lesnar destroying things, or anybody, if it's Braun Strowman even, big men destroying things, make savage attacks, big men doing big, gnarly things to each other, or even inanimate objects, is is a special kind of YouTube draw.
Vince McMahon knew that. He understood that, Brandon.
He did. And we thank him for it.
Yeah, and no, we talk about sometimes like Google Trends and stuff, like some of the female wrestlers and women wrestlers doing quite well and ranking very well in these. But interesting to note that neither in WWE or AEW that none of those no YouTube videos seemingly featuring women.
No women. Sexism is still alive.
Yeah, maybe they need to bring in Drew Cordero to help solve that issue. But
yes. I mean, there's another Saudi show coming up probably in the spring too. So we'll continue on here, and so we'll now tackle some cage match data and look at what were the most highly rated matches on cagematch.net. Bring all the cage match baggage into this. And we've got the top 10 most highly rated matches on the screen here of the year of 2022. 3 of the top 5 are matches between the Briscoes and FTR. All their 3 big pay-per-view Ring of Honor matches. Number 1, right now, and I believe it's tied for number... Wait a minute. We have a 3-way tie. By the way, this is very different than it was a day ago. I did this just this morning, I think, off of a scrape that was probably made at like 1 a.m. last night, because, yes, that's what I was doing with my New Year's Eve. I was doing Python scrapes of cagematch.net. But anyway, if we look at this, at the day prior I scraped this, and the Julia and Shuri match had just happened, and that was way up at 9.78, and that has since calmed down. Because that match just happened on December 29th, and that has calmed down to what I think is number 6 here. Anyway, maybe people were getting, but even that aside, a lot of these numbers have changed. Maybe this is just the fact that a lot of people, it's the end of the year, and a lot of people are getting in there and ranking their matches for whatever reason.
They're going through their spreadsheets and they're looking at
and we actually have vote counts, so I guess we could precisely look at this. So let's say this Ring of Honor April's 1st match, Briscoes, it's not even ranked here, and now it's number 1. Is that right?
True.
That is true. It was not even in the top 10, and now it is it is tied for number 1.
How many more votes has it gotten?
I don't know, because it's not on my other table. But let's look at the So Okada and Will Ospreay from this is the G1, right?
Yep.
In August 18th, that had 387. Is that in the table? Yeah, it had 321. So it has 50 more votes. Maybe I just had an old scrape here, but I had 300 votes. So it's, and anyway, I won't get into the minutia of how I scrape these things. But we had a lot of votes. And let's see, we'll do one more here. And then the Royal Quest FTR and Aussie Open match, which only had 51 votes. That's the October. Is that still up here? It is. It went from 51. Maybe I just had an old scrape.
Yeah, you have to have had an old scrape. I don't think.
Anyway,
you can check in with Philippe if he has gotten a bunch of votes.
Big influx
yesterday.
Anyway, what we're looking at now, this one that's in color, is up to date as of twilight last night. And we have number 1, the Ring of Honor April 1st match. That's the straight tag, right? No gimmicks.
This is the first. Yes, this is the first one.
This is the Super Card of Honor one.
Yeah.
And then Okada and Will Ospreay from the G1, and then the dog collar match from the last Final Battle pay-per-view, and then from just Tap Out, El Desperado and Jun Kasai. That is number 4. That is the one that is not tied with for number 1. And then we've got the Death Before Dishonor, FTR and Briscoes tag, and then the Julia and Shuri match from a couple days ago, and then Adam Page and Bryan Danielson on the first Dynamite on TBS, and then Kazusada Higuchi versus Takeshita Konosuke from DDT, and then Josh Alexander and Mike Bailey from just November on Impact, and then the Royal Quest FTR Aussie Open match. That's the top 10 right now on CageMatch.net. Maybe some hint of who will win the Match of the Year awards across your favorite awards.
Well, the interesting thing about when I've been reading a lot of wrestling award kind of articles and podcasts and stuff, and Gunther versus Sheamus which seems to be kind of the consensus WWE match of the
Where's
year,
the WWE here?
not placing on this, which I find, I guess it's not super surprising. In a lot of cases, having a high volume of votes doesn't help your case in this specific ranking. As mentioned by, there's, Just Tap Out and Stardom and DDT and these smaller promotions that don't have impact, that don't have as nearly as many people watching, can tend to skewer more towards extreme sets and votes.
I will show you the actual spreadsheet that this comes from. The number one WWE match is Gunther versus Sheamus from Clash of the Castle. Do we have any other? The next WWE match is Tyler Bate versus Trent Seven, which is a match that apparently happened on NXT.
And many, I bet you that doesn't have. I bet you compared to all other WWE matches, that has very few votes relative to
133 versus.
How many does the? Yeah, in the Gunther
625.
Right. So, that's one of the things with the cage match. I also know in certain cage match communities,
they're biased. They love their wrestling too much.
Here's what I'll say. I've been told that within the Joshi community,
that's right. Those insane Joshi fans.
There are people. They
love it too much.
There are people who will make sure that certain Joshi ratings are very high, with the idea being as a kind of like a grassroots marketing campaign that if people are looking at this kind of stuff, what's the best match of 2022 on Cage Match? What's the best promotion? Who's the best wrestler? And they see stuff. People are going to watch them. I recommend people watch this El Desperado versus Jun Kasai match. I thought it was great, and I don't watch Just Tap Out. I don't watch that, and I don't watch Japanese deathmatch wrestling really. But because of the
listening,
what?
I hope Taka Michinoku isn't listening.
I had a good Taka Michinoku joke that I'm not going to say on air, but like that's what it is. Like this, it's used as a guide to recommend to people. I'm sure people would. The Julia versus Suri match actually declining makes sense because this just happened,
and that's not a Joshi in that case. I mean that happens across events, across matches. They usually, especially the matches that are really well received, and I imagine it's the same for things that people hate. Is that it starts off very extreme and then it kind of moderates as time goes on.
Yeah, if a match is really, really good, it tends to start out very high and then regress a little bit. But if a match is very, very bad, it often can be rated.
I mean, I see that for AW pay-per-views where it'll start out at like a 9 and it'll get to under a 9 as time goes on.
It tends to, the people who are voting immediately tend to be maybe more extreme one way or the other than the more moderate voters coming in and kind of creating an average that's maybe more realistic.
Yes. Okay. What else do we have here? The wrestlers. Now, who is the most outstanding performer? A way that you might get a hint about that is, who among the cage match data had the most matches that were rated at least 8, at least an 8.0, and by a wide margin. The answer is Will Ospreay, who has 38 matches in this year rated an 8 or higher. That's 2/3 of his matches. He's got 58 matches that have any rating. 2/3 of them are rated better than 8. 8 of them are better than 8.5, but less than 9, and 13 of them are rated 9 or better. Following him though, Jon Moxley. He's got 25 matches that are rated 8 or better. Shuri has 19 matches rated 8 or better, and she is tied with Mike Bailey. And then there's others that people can see on the screen here. So, FTR Bald is down here. He is, I don't know, what is he? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. He's number 13. He's trying to make his case, though, I know. But he's had an excellent year.
Well, so I as someone that crunches all this data for my own ratings, a big thing to me is it really depends on what promotion you're in and kind of how they allow what kind of situations they put talent in. AEW and New Japan, even if you don't necessarily favor the AEW style, the New Japan style over like a WWE style promotion, they give their wrestlers way more opportunities to have outstanding matches than WWE. Maybe under Triple H that changes a little bit, but
and our top-rated WWE wrestler is Seth Rollins. He's the only one in this. I think it's his top 20 or so.
And so it comes down to like they don't have anything like the G1 in WWE or AEW, so it allows some of those New Japan wrestlers to have these 10 really important singles matches that are usually going to get a lot of time, and that allows you to have a match that's going to end up with a high rating, as opposed to in WWE you might not work that many matches like that. Even if you worked one of those matches on every pay-per-view, that would still only be about 10 matches in the entire year. With Triple H taking over, there are tend to be longer matches on Raw and SmackDown, so maybe you see a difference next year in that. But just going through my data that I have, like my data is almost all New Japan and AEW wrestlers, because those are the guys who I see the most getting the opportunities to have those long matches that are end up being considered quite good.
I did do this by tag teams. So there's no tag team erasure here. And FTR is number one by a wide margin. They have 10 matches, rated 8 or higher, followed by the Briscoes and the Young Bucks at 6.
So are you counting the singles matches that the wrestlers have, or just tag matches?
Only these two people as a tag team. Mm-hmm. So no Young Bucks in the trios matches. Only this team as a two-person team. I think that's what it was.
Are we assessing a handicap to the Young Bucks that they are likely being sandbagged by some people who will never adamantly say that they'll never appreciate what they do, as opposed to FDR, who hit the sweet spot of appreciation from all parties?
I have not perfected my anti-Young Bucks algorithm yet to correct for that.
Well,
but I will work on that in 2023.
So this is just my personal opinion, but I was going through my ratings yesterday, and I have both Matt and Nick Jackson with at least 14 matches that I rated 4 stars or higher, which translates to at least 8 in cage match rating systems. And I had Dax Hardwood with 10 matches of 4 stars or higher, and I believe Cash Wheeler has 8. So there's 2 Dax single matches.
Cage match has Dax at 13 by himself. Well, I think this would include. Yeah, this has to include matches.
No, I believe
singles matches here.
I believe it, but I thought it was notable because I would
and the
agree
Bucks.
that,
I guess sort of to answer your question is here's Matt and Nick at where are they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're together at number 8 as individuals, yes. And this includes every match that either of them individually.
Right, and they're also
tag.
They're mostly in trios matches this year. I would assume a lot of those ratings are coming from, the best of 7 series. I know that's what's inflating their numbers for me, is that I have every single one of those best of 7 series except I think one of them at least 4 stars. So that obviously has helped them. They also missed time this year.
No Kenny Omega here, interestingly.
Well, Kenny only has those trios matches. Like
he was
missed
injured
he missed almost the entire year when you factor in injured. Well, you factor in this like the suspension and the injury for Kenny Omega. He's only wrestled for 2 months.
And I know what everybody's thinking here before someone asks. Yes, I did consider, and I did do a multiple linear regression. However, I decided that there just wasn't enough data for that multiple linear regression to be presentable, because there wasn't. You end up with you can limit it to people who had at least 10 matches, but then I felt that it just wasn't enough data. If we had every match, I don't know. I guess there are a lot of people who just didn't have enough matches to. If we did a couple of years or did a decade, yes, I think we have enough data to do a multiple linear regression. What's a multiple linear regression? It's a very mathematically. It's a really complicated math thing to basically ask the question. Okay, let's take every given wrestler and ask each one, how much does this person seem to add to the match rating? Is how it would apply to this case. And
are you so you're talking about situations like Shohei Baba having a 5-star match in 1995?
It tries to take into account when this person's added to the match, how much ratings points do they add to the match? And when we're dealing with people who have 12 matches or 10 matches, I just don't think it's a broad enough data set. If we're talking about a decade, sure. And I've done that in the past, and it's something that it's not something that I've published, but I probably will sometime in the future. Anyway, promotions. Now let's get everybody mad. Promotions that which promotion is the best? Well, no. which promotion had the most matches on Cage Match that were rated 8 or higher in the year of 2021? And the answer is, again, for at least the fourth consecutive year, it probably goes back further, New Japan Pro Wrestling. Only edging out All Elite. So they had 62, edging out All Elite Wrestling at 60, and hot on their trail though, World Wrestling Entertainment 56 to AEW 60. I have not included my sandbagging Roman Reigns algorithm in this either. We should point out that should be pointed out. And then Stardom, and then DDP, and then Noah, Game Changer, Wrestling, Impact, All Japan, Gato Move, and of course Big Japan.
It's pretty notable to me that like WWE crushed AEW last year in this rating. In the year before that, right?
That's surprising.
That WWE's rating numbers, despite all the talk about, Tony Khan mentioning Cage Match being flooded by WWE bots once Triple H took over, that WWE's numbers are pretty much the same. It appears to be that they're almost flat year to year as far as the number of matches getting 8 or higher rating.
It's so
it's
away
AEW.
from my expectations that I wonder if I did something wrong.
It's AEW getting the big boost this year. Is it maybe because...
No Ring of Honor, by the way, included in AEW. They, as Tony Khan reminds us, they are separate entities.
Cage Match did change how user friendly their system was.
It used to be better.
Well, they changed it, so now I feel like it's way easier and more user friendly to rate all matches than it used to be. It almost used to be like a match would have to get a lot of attention, and then you'd be able to rate it, or it'd have to be rated already. And it seems like in the past year or two, it's now you can rate pretty much any match you see as long as it's over 5 minutes and as long as each wrestler has a profile on the site.
Yeah.
But this also goes back to my point about like opportunity, that like the things like the G1 and the way New Japan's main cards are structured, I think create more opportunity for the wrestlers to have outstanding matches, and that's why a lot of people like New Japan Pro Wrestling. It doesn't necessarily indicate that like New Japan's wrestlers are better than AEW or WWE's wrestlers inherently, but a lot of it is to me based on like how the roster is used and how people are permitted to have outstanding matches.
Okay. And I think that's it for our match quality assessment. Live attendances. Here are the top 20 or so live attendances according to WrestleTix. Of course, leading the way, night 1 and night 2 of WrestleMania with about 66,000 each night. Secondly, the Cardiff Clash of the Castle show with 62,000 out according to WrestleTix. Then SummerSlam in Nashville, 40,000. Royal Rumble, not next year. We're only talking about past events here, but Royal Rumble in St. Louis, 39,000. Money in the Bank at Allegiant Stadium. Didn't they move it?
Yeah, I was going to say that's incorrect because they didn't have the show at Allegiant Stadium. They had to move it because of the lack of ticket sales, so they moved it to
the MGM, right?
Or is it T-Mobile?
Yeah.
One of the arenas. And I remember at the time being like, well, they have more tickets out than they have seats at the T-Mobile. Didn't they basically say you had to rebuy tickets? Like you were refunded and you had to buy the tickets again?
Clearly this row in my table should have been excluded or fixed. So let's ignore that row. But then Triple Mania, before AEW, Triple Mania, with one of their 3, I believe, Triple Mania shows, with 16,700 out. And then Forbidden Door, the most attended AEW show in the year. Forbidden Door at the United Center in Chicago, 15,000 out. Followed by Raw in Toronto at 14. Then another Triple Mania show in Mexico City in October, 14,000 out. Dynamite in Inglewood, just outside of LA, the Forum, about 14,000 out. And then another Triple Mania show. Extreme Rules, Raw at MSG in July. The Grand Slam show finally shows up here. So is that surprising people that the Inglewood show had more tickets out than the Grand Slam show? Inglewood Dynamite in June. Does anybody even remember that show? What happened on that show?
That was a huge... But their LA show was a huge deal. like when
It
it was
was the
coming
Bucks
up.
coming home. Like that was the big thing about it.
Yeah, it was their Los Angeles debut. It was,
I remember them having like a big match on Rampage at that time. Is that right? I don't know.
so that doesn't surprise me. The I'm trying to think. So like, how does the timeline of like Triple H taking over line up? So that
July
Raw,
22nd is when Vince steps.
so that Raw at Madison Square Garden was the big like Triple H's first show. Like there was
this
a picture.
This is where Brandon Ross took the picture.
Yeah,
of,
I was gonna say that
of
Brandon
Triple
Ross
H on the ramp.
had the picture of Triple H. So that was that was the big one. That Raw in Toronto. Was there anything special on that show, or is it just being in Toronto? I think maybe for the first time since the pandemic, and doing a big show there. Was there anything notable on that show at all that people can remember? Maybe in the chat. Obviously, the WWE Stadium shows carry. I'm sure, and if you were to rank this by gate, those WWE Stadium shows would be huge. I was listening to the Cubs fan did a recap of like the year in Lucha Libre, and he talked about the success AAA has had, and instead of doing the one Triple Mania event, kind of leveraging the AAA Mania brand name to have 3 separate events, and you can see that being reflected in the success that all 3 of those events had. All doing some of the largest attendance seen in wrestling this year. We talked about in Japan, the way business has been in Japan. Obviously, no Japanese promotions at all here.
Well, WrestleTix isn't tracking Japan. That's the issue. We'll get into some Japan specific attendances.
Yeah, I guess Wrestle Kingdom. You had the Wrestle Kingdom stats from like maybe night 1 of Wrestle Kingdom last year, but that's the only one.
Wrestle Kingdom with limited capacity. Where is it? It is slide number 10 on our thing here. So it had 12,000. So
yeah, so it still wouldn't crack it.
It wouldn't make this list that we have up here. And I'm sure that's the biggest. Would that be the biggest attendance in Japan? I don't think anybody would have broken.
Yeah, 12, I don't think anyone broke it. For a wrestling show, certainly not. But I think Can you go slide just real quick? So if you excuse the WWE Stadium shows, if we just obviously that you can't excuse them, they're huge success shows, but it seems like as far as this year, AEW and WWE are pretty much on equal footing when it comes to their biggest shows. WWE is obviously doing bigger crowds on a more consistent basis, but as far as the biggest shows of the year, outside of the stadium shows, and certainly like the biggest Raw versus the biggest Dynamite, they're relatively similar in the size they're drawing.
You're talking about Dynamite compared to like Raw or SmackDown?
I'm talking about like if like you were to say like entries on this list outside of the WWE Stadium shows.
Their biggest arena level shows compared to one another.
Yeah, I mean the stadium
pay-per-views for
yeah. It doesn't really mean
Dynamite
anything because you can't really excuse the stadium shows the fact that WWE was able to draw those big audiences and do those gates is obviously a huge success. What did they have announced next year for their stadium show? So Royal Rumble is going to be in a stadium
in San Antonio. WrestleMania, obviously, in LA.
Is SummerSlam announced for a stadium yet? You would think they would do it again if they had success in Nashville.
Detroit is the front runner according to Fightful. Has that been announced officially?
And that would be a stadium show, and perhaps, maybe not, but they have obviously a big stadium in Detroit.
Well, it would be stadium if it was Detroit. Yeah, I mean they could do the
Field,
Tigers.
That's still a stadium show.
They're probably doing Ford Field.
Whether it's Ford Field or Comerica, but that's likely to be a stadium show. Will they try Money in the Bank as a stadium show again? Maybe not at the same time as UFC on the same event, which is what they said. But
yeah, let's since we're on the subject of attendance, let's jump to the average. So we'll stay in the U.S. We're gonna go to some Japan attendance in a moment. So let's look at the average and the count and the total and the max for the various AEW and WWE event types. And including a lot of stadium shows, WWE pay-per-views averaged 30,000, with the max, of course, being one of the WrestleMania events. I think it's night 1. I don't know. It's one of the WrestleMania events. It's 65,653. AEW averaging 11,680 across 5 pay-per-views, including the Forbidden Door pay-per-view. SmackDown is the weekly TV show with the highest average. Raw comes next. They both are in the mid 7,000s. Dynamite averaged 5,317. AEW tapings that were not Dynamite, that were just Rampage and or Battle of the Belts, averaged 4,500. And W House shows averaged a little bit below that at 4,100. And that's been trending downward as the year has gone on. Both in the case of house shows and I think Dynamite as well, at least if you take it by quarter.
What do you think about the difference between Raw and SmackDown in selling tickets? Because SmackDown is definitely treated as the more important show, and it certainly has the biggest stars. It has Roman Reigns and Ronda Rousey and Bray Wyatt and whoever your John Cena obviously this week. And SmackDown is also running on Fridays, which most people would consider to be a better day of the week for drawing live attendance. But they're pretty much equal in what they're drawing. Do you think that's just Raw having a strong legacy brand to viewers, even if you can objectively say that SmackDown is the bigger and more important show under the way WWE has treated it the last few years? That the gap isn't really that big, despite SmackDown seeming to have a lot of advantages when it comes to drawing.
It might have to do with market too. If we broke this down to market, that's some factor. Is that enough of a factor here to explain a large part of the difference? I don't know. Yeah, but I think it's interesting that, if we look at Q3, and we probably talked about this at the time, but Q3 for Raw outdid Q3 for Raw last year, which was the return to touring time. I would not have expected that.
I mean, I think we talked about this like back in that time period, that in my opinion, when when Vince stepped down, Triple H took over, and there was this big curiosity bump for what WWE was going to look like. A lot of the people that were maybe tuning in for the first time in a few years to see what would happen, or to see Vince address his rumors, or whatever you want to say.
Shows because of that.
Perhaps, but for the viewership, like Raw saw this huge bump, and SmackDown saw a bump, but it wasn't nearly as big as Raw. And my hypothesis is that those viewers, these viewers that maybe have not been viewing the product a ton over the last few years, Raw is obviously the A show. It's still the marquee signature WWE show of the week, even if in the last few years since SmackDown has moved to Fox, clearly SmackDown is the A show in the minds of WWE, in the minds of regular viewers. But for the curiosity viewers, for the people who maybe were coming back to sample the product, Raw is still seen as the marquee WWE show that you want to watch to see what the product is like.
That does include that Q3. So this is August 22nd. So we were asking about the Toronto Scotiabank Raw. What did it have on it? It had Edge, Toronto's own Edge, against Damian Priest in the main event. Kevin Owens against Chad Gable. I mean, these are just the matches. There might have been something that was not a match that was significant on this, but that's what was on it.
Well, if you scroll down in the cage match section, some of our enlightened cage match viewers might recall anything notable. Like if there was memorable segments. Doesn't seem like it was. Just seems like it was a regular Raw show. But they did that the whole Canada tour for WWE during that time period was huge. They did great business in Western Canada. Yeah. They did great business in Montreal. Were they in Montreal? Yes. They were.
Yes.
So they were in Montreal then.
I think they did SmackDown in Montreal.
But yeah, we talked about the time as that WWE's business in Canada being kind of their first major tour of Canada since coming back. They did really good business.
Yes. And so we jump back to slide 39. The most highly rated individual events, and we're going to go back to attendance later with Japanese attendance. Well, anyway, the most highly rated individual events, which include weekly TV shows as well as major events like pay-per-views, and the Hanakamura event is the most highly rated event on Cage Match, followed by the Stardom Grand Prix show on October 1st, then the Forbidden Door show, which has many more votes than those other two shows. Tokyo Joshi Pro, their Summer Sun Princess show, and then a couple episodes of Dynamite, the June 1st one, which is the LA show, August 17th. I don't know what that one was for Dynamite. Noah the New Year, which is not this morning's show, but last year's show on the New Year. G1 Climax from August 6th from New Japan, Revolution. The list goes on and on. I don't know if there's anything meaningful there or that exciting there to talk about. But if we look at this let's just look at the weekly or the regular TV shows. Look at pay-per-views, W pay-per-views against AW pay-per-views. Or I should say W premium live events against AW pay-per-views. Look at AW Dynamite versus Rampage versus Raw versus NXT. The weekly show with the highest average event rating on Cage Match is Dynamite with a 7.7. It is also the leader for the high point, the high mark of 9.2. The highest rated Dynamite is 9.2. The lowest rated Dynamite is 5.7. The lowest rated of any of these is a 1.2 for SmackDown.
Yeah, I want to know. I'm gonna hold on. I want to see what happened on that SmackDown show.
I think that's one of the latter days of Vince McMahon where he had like 11 minutes of wrestling or something on a 2-hour program.
Yeah.
But Rampage is number 2. Raw is number 3. AEW pay-per-views outdo WPLE's 8.2 to 6.6. AEW also has the edge on the high point of 8.9 to 8.2 for pay-per-views. While you're looking that up, we've been looking at this over the years over the months of looking at what's the difference been since Paul Levesque has been in charge of creative and Vince McMahon has been out. And I did break this down by Vince versus Triple H, and Triple H is decisively ahead of Vince when it comes to Cage Match event ratings. The average for pay-per-views is a 7.6 under Triple H. It's a 5.9 under Vince. That's just within the year. SmackDown is at a 7.4 versus a 5.1 under Vince. Raw is at a 7.3 versus a 5.9 under Vince. NXT, even though Triple H is probably largely delegating that to Shawn Michaels, is at a 6.5 versus a 5.8 under Vince. So I know what everybody's asking is, well, what about when you compare Triple H's TV shows to Tony Khan's TV shows in the year? What about that comparison? And the answer is, so let's take what's SmackDown is a 7.4 and Raw is a 7.3, and we still end up just behind Dynamite with a 7.7. Better than Rampage though.
Yeah, I mean one of the things that like the jarring things and one of the things that was being talked about when Triple H took over and the kind of change on Cage Match was that especially Raw, I remember, I guess SmackDown was even worse, but those shows were not well received at all under Vince. Like even if you look at SmackDown, like their average in April of 2022 was a 4.5. It was a 4.6 in July, like pretty consistently right around 5, which in Cage Match terms is pretty low. Like if you see a show with a 5, even though it's supposed to kind of be an average, that's a really low rating. And obviously those have seen a big jump. Since Triple H took over, I think since like the Sami Zayn and Roman Reigns, especially on the SmackDown, like the Sami Zayn and Roman Reigns thing is like a legit angle that fans seem to really enjoy, which they didn't really have an angle like that in the first half of the year. So whether that you can credit Triple H with that or not, it's an obvious thing that I think has improved the shows. I have found the bad SmackDown.
Okay.
They drew 8,400 fans to it in Fort Worth, Texas. So it was a pretty big crowd. It was on July 8th. 2022. So like you said, near the end of Vince, and there was one of
his last works of art.
There's no wrestling on the show. We opened it up with a Viking Raiders versus Jinder Mahal and Shanky tag match that went a minute 15. Then we had Shinsuke Nakamura versus Ludwig Kaiser, which went 6.5 minutes. Ronda Rousey beat Natalya in 2 minutes. The Usos beat Los Lotharios in 2 minutes. And in the main event, Drew McIntyre beat Butch in a minute 30 seconds. So you're right. There was like under 10 minutes of wrestling, it seems like, on this show. I don't know. I can't tell you what any of the angles were. But it seems to be the ratings seem to be most people just complaining about how there was only one match that was longer than 2 minutes.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Where should we go next here?
There was also a 25-minute Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman promo segment on the show, apparently.
That's good. I'm sure there were many facial expressions. Okay. And we'll go to... Let's look at Japanese wrestling attendance. Which one do I want to look at first, though? Yeah, I think we want to look at this one. So what I did here, I know we got to put some big caveats in here. These are numbers from Cage Match, which probably come from the promotions themselves or come from Japanese sports outlets. So very questionable numbers that we're dealing with. But if we're dealing with a lot of data, maybe it gives us some general idea about what the hierarchy, what the order is of promotions when it comes to attendance. And what do we see here? So what I narrowed this down to, I had some qualifiers here. What I wanted was you got to have at least 50 events on the year, and we got to have at least 75% of your events have numbers to them. So that's what we've got here. And we've got New Japan with the highest average, followed by Stardom at 702 with an average of 702, which is well above their 469 of the year prior. Followed by Noah, All Japan, Kyushu Pro Wrestling. I've never heard of this. Have you heard of this, Jesse?
Kyushu Pro Wrestling?
Kyushu. You familiar?
No.
Okay. Well, followed by higher than Dragon Gate. Higher than Dragon Gate. Followed by Oz Academy. Followed by GLEAT, Tokyo Joshi Pro DT, and of course Pro Wrestling Freedoms.
Yeah, what's going on with Kyushu Pro Wrestling?
With an average of 430. Anyway, and then I extrapolated, okay, we know the number of events you have. Let's just multiply the number of events you have by the known average that you have. And it's a similar breakdown. But then I wanted to ask, okay, who among these has both a higher average and a higher total, estimated total? These are all very, very questionable numbers. But who has a higher average and a higher total by this data than they did last year? And two promotions are true in both of those questions, and that is Stardom and GLEAT. And any news, Jesse, on Kyushu Pro Wrestling? The latest update.
Seems to be a small regional independent group. You said you wanted at least 50 shows.
Yes.
At Cage Match, I'm only seeing that they ran 31 events in 2022.
Okay.
So, and what's their? Let me do some quick calculations here. What's their average?
430 attendance.
Their average is 430. So even if we were to times that by 31, that would only put them at 13,000
total.
Okay.
Maybe there's a problem with my spreadsheet.
Yeah. I'd be very surprised if they were doing bigger than Dragon Gate, and Dragon Gate's not doing like particularly well at the moment. But I mean, Dragon Gate was the number 2 drawing promotion in Japan before the pandemic.
In 2019, that's what we see here. Yeah.
And they haven't experienced. There's been a few reasons for. I think that I'm not the biggest Dragon Gate expert, but they have.
We'll have to defer to Iron Mike Spear someday.
Well, they're launching a new generation of talent. That's part of it. Is that they are aggressively pushing a lot of younger wrestlers, and as we talked about when it comes to the new names don't move business like the old names in WWE. The same can possibly be said for Dragon Gate.
No more Masato Yoshino.
Masato Yoshino is retired. Shima and some of the Strong Hearts guys aren't with the company anymore. Shingo Takagi obviously left to go to New Japan, although he was on the Christmas show. But
Right.
They're pushing Shun Skywalker. They're pushing Yuki Yoshioka as their world champions. So that takes time. Stardom, obviously, their growth on all these charts is really impressive. They were purchased by Bushiroad over the time period that we're looking at.
Yes. We were looking at 2019 to 2022.
And they've developed a lot of talent. We'll see. They could be staring at a very big 2023, especially if Sasha Banks is associated with them, certainly in the Western audiences. Pro Wrestling Noah was bought by Cyber Agent.
And we have one more way to look at this. So you might be thinking, well, this data is kind of nonsense, and maybe it's not really fair because there's a lot of attendances that aren't reported here. So one way that may be better to look at this is look at just Korakuen Hall attendances, because probably everybody here runs Korakuen Hall. So what I did was give me all the Korakuen Hall shows, only Korakuen Hall, and when you rank it this way, New Japan is not nearly number 1 in 2022. They're average in Korakuen Hall. Maybe their numbers are just more truthful. That's possible. But their average on Cage Match, the attendances that are on Cage Match, which is 31 of them, 718. And they're number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're ranked number 7 here. Does this make any sense?
Yeah.
Number 1 is Stardom.
So with, I know there was a lot of discussion.
Is this a limited capacity issue?
Part of it is, I don't know how much of it is limited capacity in the sense that it doesn't really impact, that would theoretically impact most of these promotions. A discussion that I heard in New Japan circles, in general with their business, is that throughout the pandemic, they've ran Tokyo too much in general, and that they have run Korakuen Hall in particular too much. Now, if you compare, they only ran 31 events in 2022 compared to 39 in 2019, so it's not like they ran that much more, but
looks like they ran 67 times last year, or in 2021.
Right. But they've run, almost twice as many events as almost any other promotion in Tokyo, in Korakuen Hall. Yeah. And there's an argument that they're like overexposed in that audience. I'd have to look at their scheduling. Some part of me thinks that they ran like during I don't know if it's Best of the Super Juniors or World Tag League, but they ran like Korakuen Hall shows like one after another, as opposed to spreading them out maybe more throughout the year.
And there are probably other caveats like limited at the capacity that hardcore pro fans, if they're listening, are probably shouting about as they're listening to this. But number 1 is it. For these numbers, whatever they're worth, number 1 is Stardom. Number 2 is a conglomerate of shows that are just categorized as freelance shows. Followed by Dragon Gate, All Japan Pro Wrestling, Act Wrest Girl Z, and that's Gullo's favorite promotion, Oz Academy, New Japan, Freedoms, 01, Real Japan. Maybe we could go on. Okay. But Stardom, who knows if these numbers are credible, but Stardom appears to be doing better over time, especially when we look back at where we're looking at the attendance overall here. Stardom is also continuing to climb in web search in Japan. This is Google web search just focused in Japan. And since 2021, they've exceeded above WWE, above Dragon Gate, above Noah. Noah is looking to, if we look way down here in the bottom of the y-axis, Noah might be exceeding Dragon Gate at this point. And New Japan, of course, is multiple times above all of them. But Stardom continues to climb. And I remember I'd said it on a podcast probably earlier in the year, more than a year ago. In April of 2021, Lavi mentioned that I was saying that Stardom should be considered among the 5 biggest promotions in the world. People did not like that I said this. Got some very questioning feedback on this. But Stardom seems to be doing okay. And maybe and who knows what Sasha Banks will end up doing, if she'll end up going to Stardom, or maybe just the USA version of New Japan. That may be in for another boost.
Yeah, 5. What other giant promotions do people think exist in the world? I guess they would have to be. You would definitely say that
WAW New Japan.
AEW New Japan.
Okay, who's after that?
Well, AAA and CMLL, I would assume, are bigger than those two than Stardom. Surely.
I guess I would question this as a revenue generator. I think the 2 big Mexican promotions are at a disadvantage just because of the economy that they're in.
Right. But if we're talking about drawing crowds and drawing paid crowds as opposed to Great Khali's promotion drawing a huge crowd in India. A real, and obviously having a long historical legacy of being a functioning business in both of those promotions standpoints, I would still rate them higher than Stardom. But Stardom's the number 2 promotion in Japan based on a lot of metrics. But we've seen this before, people being hesitant to say that Dragon Gate was the 2nd biggest promotion in Japan. Dragon Gate can't be bigger than All Japan Pro Wrestling. Or Dragon Gate can't be bigger than Noah. And DDT can't be bigger than All Japan Pro Wrestling, but it is.
Yeah.
So part of that is a legacy thing. Stardom hasn't been around that long.
Yes. I know there was some data from, was it KRT.jp, something like that. There's some sort of public looking website, and I'm not prepared to talk about this, but there is some financial data about at least Noah. I think showing Noah is still a money loser for what that's worth, and a few other promotions. There's data out there.
Right. Well, Cyber Agent, the big company that owns Pro Wrestling Noah, I don't know if that I'm way over my skis here, but I don't know if that's a publicly traded company and some of their expenses have to be publicly disclosed.
But I'm sure they're not like breaking down in their filings something that's
Right.
is a small piece of their business.
I know
as...
Cyber Agent lost a lot of money this year in general. I think they might have spent like a lot of money like broadcasting the World Cup in Japan and things like that. Like it was a very aggressive spending year. And if I recall, the outlook was that they'd feel comfortable continuing to aggressively spend, which would be theoretically a good thing for Noah and DDT and Tokyo Joshi Pro and all the promotions under their umbrella.
But we expect Sasha Banks to make some sort of appearance at Wrestle Kingdom.
She's not announced for a match.
No.
That's important. But
and should we be calling her Sasha Banks? Should we be calling her Mercedes Monet or whatever her name will end up being?
Will she form a tag team with Big Boss Shimizu?
These are the questions that people want to know. And so then another question, speculation about who is Soraya's partner going to be on the January 11th LA Dynamite? Is it going to be Sasha Banks?
If I were to put a gun to my head and make me guess, I would say yes.
I think so. I don't know anything. I would think
just
so.
based on having studied Tony's,
based on Tony not downplaying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has not said anything that would lead people to doubt it.
We do have Alan Cunahan in the chat saying, hey guys, just on the Japanese attendances, restrictions by and large the same across the board, and numbers are legitimate for the most part. Everybody reports real numbers now. So he would know much more about it than we would.
Have you watched the December 11th, 2000 match between Yuji Nagata teaming with Masanobu Fuchi versus Takashi Iizuka it's Takashi Iizuka and Yuji Nagata versus Toshiaki Kawada and Masanobu Fuchi from Osaka Professional Gym, December 11th, 2000. Alan sent you the link. You've watched it. Your thoughts?
I haven't watched it.
Oh, okay.
Did he?
Great match.
He might have sent me the link. I feel
he did.
bad.
He sent us both the link. Oh. Yes. So that I
done.
don't have
There's
to. I was going
to
send you the VHS tape. Had the package ready to go, but Alan
there's nothing I want to do. There's nothing I want to do less than disappoint Alan. So
yes. Okay. A few more things to go through here. I've prepared a lot of data. Who had the most matches in 2022? Well, at least based on the data that we have from Cage Match, which is, I know people are going to remind me, this is an incomplete source of data, but it's probably the most complete for the country of Japan. And we have, who had the most matches? Well, it's almost, in the top 20 or so here. I think it's completely people who have wrestled in Japan. And that's usually the way it is.
These are the top three are Japanese indie workers.
Fuminori Abe, are you familiar with him? I'm not. Is that
yeah, he's in Big Japan a lot. What's that other promotion he's in? He's like it's like Pro Wrestling Brats or something like that. I forget. Brass, like BRAS.
You just put any noun in front of the word pro wrestling.
Yeah,
you
probably
got yourself a Japanese.
But yeah, he's these are indie workers that they run. Like I think he did like Big Japan runs like almost 100, probably around 100 matches shows a year, maybe more. There's and I feel like if you were to go back year over year, a lot of these guys would be similar, especially since WWE's kind of toned down their touring. There's no WWE wrestlers on this. There's no American wrestlers on this.
We'll get to it, a U.S. Canada isolation in a moment. Number 2 is Shigehiro Irie, who is often, and this is not just Japan. I'm sure for him, he's gone to the U.S. and whatnot as well.
He's in Europe a lot. A tie between Fukujin Death, who I believe is a comedy wrestler, and then a bunch of Dragon Gate guys. That so typically,
I think this is just an alternate name for the same person.
Oh, okay, okay,
yeah.
It's a woman wrestler. I'm pretty sure she wrestles for Tokyo Joshi Pro a lot. Terrible wrestler, but if it's who I'm thinking it is. But then basically some Japanese independent wrestlers, but then a lot of these guys are Dragon Gate guys, and that's basically, since I've been following it, consistent with what happens year to year. Dragon Gate runs the most shows. They run a lot of small shows, and these guys wrestle a ton of multi-man tag matches.
And so we got, and by the way, so Fuminori Abe has 201 matches, the only person with over 200, but we're also seeing again, Irie, Fukujin Death, Dragon Kid, let's see if I can pronounce these names, Eita, Daimonji So, Takayuki Nomura, KZ, get that right? Kai,
Yeah.
Yuki Yoshioka, Susumu Mochizuki, I know that guy, Kota Minoura, Masahiro Takanashi, Daisuke Sekimoto, still going strong, Masaki Mochizuki, BB Hulk, Benkei Yamato, HYO, and Asuka, not the WWE Asuka, I'm sure.
Who's Susumu Mochizuki? Do they mean
Susumu
Susumu Yokosuka? Oh, he's in like the Mochizuki, the stupid Dragon Gate Mochizuki stable where everyone has Mochizuki as their last name now.
Well, I think back in the day, I'm glad Alan's listening, so back in the day, wasn't he originally Susumu Mochizuki? Like in the
Oh, that's Dragon Gate lore. I don't know. I see when I first started really watching Dragon Gate, he was Jimmy Susumu to me because he was in the Jimmy stable where everyone's name was Jimmy, and then he's been Susumu.
So in my VHS days, I think he was Susumu Mochizuki.
Yeah, so maybe he's back with Mochizuki and Mochizuki Jr. and probably some other people named Mochizuki. But he's he wrestled I think I don't know if it was this year, but he wrestled like a lot like in like Noah. I think he was like junior heavyweight champion in either Noah or All Japan.
Okay, so what may be of interest to more of our listeners is what's the U.S. Canada breakdown of this, and we're going to look at who had the. Oh, this is only so it's like the top 50 or so, the most matches in the U.S. or Canada according to Cage Match. It's not a complete record. I'm sure it's missing a lot of indie stuff, but number one is an indie worker, Alec Price. Who's worked ESW shows that I've helped produce and that Gullo has ring announced, full disclosure. 149, more than any WWE wrestler. Number two is Marcus Mathers, who I think was at the top of this list last year. Mike Bailey. Billy Starks. Speedball Mike Bailey. Billy Starks.
Billy Starks being a high school student and being in the top 5 is pretty impressive.
She was in the top 5 last year too, if I remember.
I think so, especially for promotions. Bobby Orlando, Masha Slamovich, and now finally we have some W workers. The Usos, both of them at 122. Shawn Martins, which is not a name I'm familiar with. Austin Theory, who got his first name back this year. Congratulations to him. Seth Rollins, Cole Radrick, Jordan Oliver, Liv Morgan, Blake Christian, One Called Manders, Akira, Bianca Belair, Alex Shelley, Matt Riddle, Harlan Abbott, Jordan Cruz, Anthony Henry, Josh Alexander, Jimmy Lloyd, Effie Davey Richards, Dante Martin, Dominic Guarini, Allie Catch, Montez Ford, Nick Wayne, Ricochet, Chad Gable, Bryce Donovan, Kevin Blackwood, who I helped train, full disclosure, Kofi Kingston, Danny Dugan, Drew McIntyre, Channing Thomas, JD Drake, Austin Luke, Travis Cole, Max Caster. Again, the number one there is Alec Price with 149 matches. You have something there?
I was to say, I think and Cole Radrick, I think, was 2020's number one, so it dropped
Sounds
a little
familiar.
bit there, but yeah.
Who wrestled for the most promotions? I think this is sort of an impression, especially for indie workers. Who worked for the most variety of unique promotions? And number one is Davey Richards. 51 different promotions he wrestled for in the United States or Canada. Or I think this is worldwide. So I don't know if this is-
What a guy, Davey Richards. 51 different promotions at this stage of his career.
Yeah. I think he wrestled for ESW in this year, too. Again, was that Daniel Garcia? That
That
this year?
was last year. I know I announced him in Excite
Sorry.
this year, so
I
against
should say
Kevin Bennett.
2021.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Masha Slamovich is number two. Mike Bailey, Billy Starks, Shaz McKenzie, Jordan Oliver, Effie, Cole Radrick, Man Like DeReese. Am I saying that right, Gullo? You're an expert at pronouncing independent wrestlers' names. Trish Adora, Bandito, Akira, Alec Price, Arrow Boy, Janai Kai, Dirty Dango, Rob Killjoy, Ares, Shigehiro Iri, Jody Threat, Myron Reed. That's the top 20 or so who had between 30 and 50 different promotions that they worked for, recorded by Cage Match.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
Unfortunately, all of them closed up, but I feel like this used to be dominated by UK wrestlers because of the amount of wrestlers, the amount of promotions you can get to in the UK, as well as working in Europe and occasionally the US. So it's kind of telling to me that there's not nearly as many UK-based wrestlers on this list as there used to be.
This is worldwide, and
Kinda
I have a
summarized.
breakdown among UK, Ireland, and things like that too.
I'm impressed with Davey going to 51 promotions for a guy that he must not have worked. Like, how many matches did he work this
Is he
year?
on the top list of people who had matches in the US?
I'm gonna look at it now. He worked
Yeah, he had,
87 matches this year.
I have 92 on this list.
Oh,
I don't
okay. Well, that's basically the same number anyway. To do so, he was like one and done in most of these promotions.
Right, that's an average of like less than 2 matches.
Yeah,
Special
in that
appearance. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive because he's just. I mean, that means he's going probably all over the country to do it. It's not like he's just in one area.
Okay, are we at the end of our thing here? Let me look. We'll briefly touch on W Stock, which is closed at the end of the close of business on Friday, $68.50. It's been on a downward trend since early or maybe late in November or so. Nonetheless, year to date, up 37%. Up 37%. What do those indexes do year to date? Down 20%. Down 34%. Dow Jones down 9%. So WWE really outperformed the market despite a weak finish for the year, still outperforming the market strongly. And most importantly, destroying the trend against Bitcoin. Bitcoin is down 65%. W stock is up 37%. And finally, the main event. Chris Gullo, please observe the slide and tell us what you see.
I mean, the Dogecoin didn't have a good year. I'll just say that.
Doge did not go as negative as Bitcoin, though. Doge only down 60%, 60.5%.
Doge was never worth as much as Bitcoin.
it had less value, perhaps, to lose in the first place.
Yeah,
but a strong year in a bear market for W stock. That's all I have. We can do super chats now. We're nearly at 2 hours. I apologize for going so long.
No, it's okay. I think our audience appreciated it. We have a super chat here from Mario Meza, just a super sticker. Thank you, Mario. Just want to applaud us there. And then we have a super chat here from Big Time Baxter. With SmackDown doing big numbers with viewers outside the demo, since that bode well as far as TV renewals. They aren't dead last in total viewers. So the SmackDown doing big numbers, is that going to help with, as far as the TV rights contract? It seems like what he's asking.
It can't hurt, right? Because I think like previously used to be like maybe earlier this year, like SmackDown was sometimes last among network shows in total viewers, first in the demo but lower in total viewers. And now they're more competitive.
Yeah.
Now they're more competitive in total viewers. That can't be a negative.
No, I think. I think because Fox is a broadcast network that is more reliant on ad revenue than a cable network is, that demo is more important for SmackDown than total viewers is. But total viewers represents subscription, which represents a big piece of traditional TV still, because even Fox, despite being available on an antenna, is getting some money from carriage fees too. So it helps, yes, to have viewers of any age. This ending the year with a really big rating, it looks like, doesn't hurt, but it ultimately will be about the average of what it delivers on a consistent basis when it comes to TV deals. And as the year ends, I still expect WWE to, if not from Fox, from someone else, to get an upgrade for its Raw and SmackDown rights at the rate of somewhere around 70%.
All right. And that is, I believe, all that we had today.
Okay.
But we had a consistently 50+ people throughout almost the whole 2
big
hours.
Draw.
So thank you guys. Hey,
Big new. We're like a Japanese promotion. We do big business on New Year's Day.
yeah.
Yes, we can't. Not all that attendance is paid, but they were.
Yeah, some of these have been kicked. People will say that Allen was a plant, coming in at a precise time with some key pure knowledge, but that was not the case.
Yes. Quickly, we have the Patreon if you want to support it, patreon.com/Wrestlenomics. You get my TV ratings reports nearly every day. Quarter hours continue to be available. We've got some information that will be coming up this week, just an update on Impact and New Japan and WoW ratings that have not been reported elsewhere. That'll be coming up in the week to come. Access to the Wrestlenomics spreadsheet. We'll do a Wrestlenomics 30. Didn't do one this week. We will do one this coming Thursday with Gullo and I expect. Slides, including the slides that we just went through. You get access to them if you're a subscriber. If you log into Wrestlenomics.com, you'll be able to view the the subscriber posts that way too at patreon.com/Wrestlenomics.
Real quick, Stilo Latino gave us a super chat donation.
Thank you.
So thank you, Stilo.
Thank you. Anything else to plug, you guys?
You can go first, Jesse, if you got anything.
No, I wrote an article for Wrestlenomics.com a couple weeks ago, looking at how we evaluate AEW from a critical perspective and how that is related to WCW and the collapse of WCW over the last few years of its existence, and how some people are still traumatized by that collapse and are constantly being spooked by anything that happens in AEW that could signal a similar kind of trajectory downwards. I also wrote a series of articles for voicesofwrestling.com that came out last week, looking at, I wrote 4 articles, each looking at the, quote unquote, 4 pillars of AEW, looking at MJF, Jungle Boy, Sammy Guevara, and Darby Allin, kind of evaluating their careers so far and looking forward to the future of how close they are to kind of becoming the faces of AEW as they were probably originally intended to be. And they obviously are kind of on different paths.
And you have another article on Wrestlenomics coming soon that I still have to edit and get ready.
Yes, there should be. It should probably this week. We'll be running. I'm very excited about that article. I thought it came across fair. I wrote when I finished writing it, I was like, sometimes I write stuff and I'll be like, yeah, I mean, this it makes a point, but it wasn't originally what I envisioned, and it's not as strong as I maybe thought it would be, because you really ultimately don't know until you put the words down how good your article is going to be. When I finished that one, I was like, oh, this is good. This is quality. So I'm excited to see, have people read that and see what they have to say about it.
Okay.
Rediscover the Indies is back after a brief hiatus. We did part 3 of our Dragon Gate USA deep dive and cover mostly 2010 in that episode. Talk about Bryan Danielson returning and to just go back to WWE, but the business that did that, the pay-per-view business, Ring of Honor trying to sabotage Dragon Gate USA, and Dragon Gate USA returning the favor. So there's a lot of good stuff in that episode in part 3, and part 4 will be interesting because we'll talk about the Go Fight Live pay-per-view, and that should be out late January. So yeah, check out Rediscover Indies RTI Pod, and available on all podcast streaming.
Nice. Gullo, you going to the Monday Night Football game tomorrow?
It's in Cincinnati.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in Cincinnati. Yes, I'll be watching it from my comfortable home, but I will be at the stadium next week Sunday for the Buffalo Bills versus New England Patriots.
Yeah, we're probably going to need a little bit of help from the Bills. I would like it if, depending on if the Patriots can beat Miami this week. It would be awesome. I think this would be a great matchup. Would be like Matt Barkley plays for the Bills. Like, could Matt Barkley beat the Patriots? I think that's a question worth exploring if you're the Bills. Like,
I don't think they do that.
You don't have to play Josh Allen. It's.
No.
I think
we're
the people want to see Matt
to.
Barkley.
If we beat Cincinnati and KC wins again, we are going to have to play.
Yeah, that's
Allen.
I think the big thing is we're counting on, like, the Patriots could beat Miami this week, especially because they're at home against Teddy Bridgewater, and Buffalo could obviously beat Cincinnati. But what we really need to happen for that game not to matter for Buffalo is for Kansas City to lose to the Broncos, and I don't think that's happening. So, unfortunately,
speaking of plugs, Jesse, were you not on the Intelligentsia most recently?
Yeah, I don't know how to plug that, but yes, if you want to hear me and Joe Lanza talk for 3 hours about
my ears were burning after the last audio show that he did his Thursday reviews, as I was alerted that I was being spoken about, and he's constantly plugging Wrestlenomics, which we appreciate. So I just want to make sure you got your Intelligentsia plug in there.
The key with doing the Intelligentsia and Joe's Thursday reviews is we record the Intelligentsia on Wednesday nights, like immediately after Dynamite, and we usually have a 1-hour discussion about the episode of Dynamite before we start recording the Intelligentsia. And I told him I'm trying to work my opinions to see if they come out in his Thursday TV reviews, because I talked to him immediately after Dynamite, try to workshop some of my opinions into his analysis. It's been a long con, but it's starting to become quite fruitful.
Okay. That's all for this week. We'll be back on Thursday for subscribers only. We'll record a show Thursday evening. We'll probably be out on Thursday evening. But other than that, we'll be back again with audio and video on Sunday, every Sunday, at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for listening and supporting. Talk to you next time.